Limina, for its kind. Just a grammatical note. How do we know that this is a possessive for its kind? So if you look at the hey, the last letter in the word limina, you'll notice that there is a dot in the hey. There's something called a mapik in the hey. That is a signification of the possessive, of something belonging to something. And if you have a Balkore who is very careful, who's medactic, you will notice that there is a little bit of a different pronunciation. That hey actually has an expression in the way that the word is pronounced, and we'll hear that, I guess, when we read the sentence at the end. For its kind, number 3. Meanwhile, each of those who arrived at the ark was looking for its kind. So this is a revi'i. Revi'i is a note that stands alone, that tells you that this is something that is a little bit self-sufficient and perhaps is a little standoffish to things that are different from it. Meanwhile, each of those who arrived at the ark was looking for its kind to associate with when entering, as pointed out by the broad meaning of the reading mark. So the Revi'i says that each kind, each particular type of animal stayed with its own kind, stayed aloof, stayed on its own. The chol habehema, the pashta, and all the cattle. Pashta looks forward and slightly trumpets the word, slightly gives us a focus on the word. The wild beast assumed a policing role, and all the cattle of slower mobility arrived on time at the ark, as stressed by the directional shape of the reading mark. So we see the chaya, the wild animals, coming first, and the tame and domesticated animals coming second. So from this we're inferring that the wild animals, in fact, sort of herded the more domesticated animals and kept them from going the wrong direction.
You can almost see that again, the shape reading mark, the chaya, or the mapach, is very sharp angle, very sharp, whereas the chol behema is rounded.
They're being corralled. Limina, with a katon. So we'll notice that last limina had a revi'i, so it sort of stood alone, whereas this limina, this one has the two-part shape for its kind. In the ark, each species easily found its proper place, which was reserved for its kind, as shown by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So there was a correct space and an incorrect space, and each one went to the correct space. That's the two parts, or we could say that there was a way that they were organized outside and a way that they were organized inside. And when they were inside, they found the correct place. We have to find a 2 here. And as we had already said with the first limina, that each species is respecting its own species, having the word limina come again, the Torah wouldn't be redundant unless there was something new to learn from that. So we have to learn something new from this. So they're already staying to their own species. So now they're not only staying to their own species, they're staying to their own species and to the proper place. So that's why the second limina has a katon and the first one had a revi'i. The first one is trumpeting and is standing alone, not only because the species didn't intermix or intermingle, but because that is part of the focus of why these species were spared to go on the ark, because they're doing what they're supposed to do now, which they weren't doing before. And by the way, they went to their right place as well.
Could we also? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No. Could we also say kol hachaya lamina? Again, the chaya has a very definitive, very aggressive mark. It has nothing to do with hema, with that ta'arovet of the previous society. And these are very aggressively searching out their own kind, and therefore you have a revi'i that stands alone, that is not getting involved with what was before, and it is in an active role, a leadership role, as you say. Kol ha-behema lemina is being corralled. It's more passive. We're kind of like, as you say, herded, and we have the shape of the reed mark over the behema. And lemina meaning is being slotted passively into their spaces. So it's not an active or a leadership role. It's a passive or a receptive role.
You see, what we need to find for limina is something that has a two to it.
A two.
It's got to have sort of a double meaning, a better and a worse, perhaps.
Oh, you mean for the second limina?
So the second limina. So there could have been an improper space and a proper space. So they went to their proper space, not to their improper space, or they were perhaps more randomly associated outside and more properly associated inside. Or the fact that you've got 7 pairs of each, and they perhaps went to a space together, but weren't necessarily exactly coupled. There might have been 7 pairs, but they might not have stayed true to that pair. So again, we have to find something that is a double there to stay true to the formula that we're going by here.
That makes sense.
When you say the two words, they're the same word, lamina, but with the two different tropes.
Yeah.
Can you say them or sing them for me side by side so I can hear the difference?
Hema v'chol hachaya lemina v'chol habehema lemina.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard the dot and hey at the end. Lemina.
Yeah. No, I
versus
definitely see the difference.
without the dot and the hey. Lemina.
Yeah.
Lemina. So you actually pronounce the hey. You get a breathy sound to it. But lemina. Lemina. The one is standing by itself, and you got to pause after that. And the second one is a much more minor pause after it, and much less standing by itself. The whole haremes with the tevir. Well, remember the tevir is this sheltered outside with something being protected on the inside, and each of the creeper, number 6, all slow-moving species and each of the creeper kind arrive to their destination without an undue delay, as suggested by the shape of the reading mark.
How did
So-
you derive that from the tevir? Is that a tevir?
So again, it's a tevir. So they're going to reach shelter, and you would think that, wow, how did the snails manage to get there the same length of time that the cheetah managed to get there? So the shelter that the ark is going to provide is going to happen for these species as well, even if they are slow. So even if they're creeping along the ground, they're going to make it in time. They are going to get the shelter that everybody else has managed to get.
I started out way earlier.
When Noah started, they go, yeah,
Well,
we better
no,
start packing.
they're all starting at the same time. So you have to think, how did that manage to happen?
Yeah.
Haromes, that creeps with a mercha. Mercha looks forward to what's going to come after it, and doesn't completely separate itself out from what's come before. Number 7, despite the difficulties of migration connected with a species that creeps, it reached its goal on time, as expressed by the directional shape of the reading mark. So the nosim, the things that are creeping, that are going slow, that are crawling on the earth, still manage to get there. Al haaretz, with the tivcha completing the previous phrase, over the earth. Number 8. Even though they encountered various obstacles while moving over the earth, they caught up to arrive properly for entry, as confirmed by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. So we are completing the thought that harames, that they're creeping, even though they're slow, they are still managing to complete their task. liminehu, for its kind, within etnachta. This is a stabilizing mark, and perhaps with something looking slightly up from it. Like the others, they too managed to find their proper placement in the ark, where it was prepared for its kind, as specified by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So the space in and of itself was appropriate for the creature, and that's the stability of it, and certainly the logistics of having a space that is appropriate for multiple species in one contained area is a feat in and of itself. So this is not only stabilizing, everybody's got the proper environment to live in, but by the way, the organization that had to have gone into something that would fit that certainly points to something more elevated, something higher had to have been in the planning.
Anybody's loaded a cruise ship. That's
What, you get up at 6 a.m., you wait in line for 2 hours to get off, and then you wait again. I mean,
the loading is the 6-hour process, yeah. And that's just for 5,000 people.
The whole ha'of, and all the fowl, with a zakeh for the munach. Again, this is going to slightly separate itself out from what's come before and lead forward. The slow creepers had already arrived at the ark, and all the fowl which could easily overcome various road obstructions came after the creepers, as illustrated by the shape of the reading mark and by being mentioned later. So
this is the chicken across the road, right?
We're noting that the order in which these things are mentioned are not just that they all happen to have come at the same time, but this seems to be a hierarchy again. As we mentioned with Noach's sons, that things are actually coming in that order and in that organization, rather than just perhaps all making plans and coming together. The zakef, the munach, separates itself out from the things that have come before. And we have a side note. By the same understanding, the wild beasts from the remote wilderness arrived prior to the domesticated cattle, which was near the ark, as noted by the sequence in the text. So again, we notice that the sequence that we're getting is telling us exactly the order that things went in, and it defies a little bit of logical organization. If you wanted this to happen, all the things that went slow,
put the food in first.
Put the food in first. All the things that go really fast go next, and the things that go medium fast go next, and then the things that go slow go last, so they don't get trampled on the way. But here we have things both filling a task, the wild animals herding the less wild animals, and things following a particular order. Number 11, liminehu, for its kind. In those conditions of rushing and crowding, the fowl found easy access for its kind because of the planning of the ark, as conveyed by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So again, this has a katon, this has that two-part note. Got it? Laminehu, number 11.
Yeah. What is the difference between lamina and laminehu?
Not a lot. So they both mean exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so that's right.
One is a masculine, one is a feminine. One is also a more emphatic. Lamine was also more emphatic than lamina. So I believe laminehu can be feminine as well. It's just a more emphatic feminine. But I could be wrong, and that I'll have to look up. But as I said, it's masculine and feminine definitely as a difference, and more emphatic. In those conditions of rushing and crowding, number 11. The fowl found easy access for its kind. And again, I think what we're emphasizing here is the fact that there could have been a wrong space and a right space, and they found their way into the right space. And that's why we've got again that two-part shape, similarly to like we had with Chol HaBehema Lemina. Kol, most, with a tipcha. Tipcha focuses us back on what has come before. Most of the species arrived in a sequential order by which overcrowding was prevented, allowing easy access to the site, which was designed for them in the ark, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So when we're talking about the way that the animals came, we are folding in all of the above categories, and that's why we have this with a tipcha, looking back to everything that's come before it. Tzipor, of a bird, with a mercha. Number 13. Among the last ones that arrived for embarkation to the ark were flying kinds of a bird or insects, which paradoxically should have been the first, as demonstrated by the directional shape of the reading mark. So again, mercha looks forward. It should have been the first one, and everything should have come after that. But there is obviously a following of a divine order here, and that's why it doesn't make sense. They're coming in a way that they won't trample each other, but they're not coming in what we would define as the most logical or the most efficient manner. And again, that stands together with Be'etzem, that God said this is going to happen, whether people or nature wants to stop it or not. So things are going by the order that He has specified, not by logic, not by nature. Kol kanaf.
It's interesting how they distinguish between fowl and bird.
Domesticated and not domesticated. Same thing as chaya and behema. Kol kanaf, all winged, with a sof pasuk. Sof pasuk is a stabilizing note. The female was accompanied by all winged. The finale was accomplished by all winged species, which were admitted and found a suitable vacancy for their occupation. Yes. So as the last of the groups comes in, and again finds its appropriate space, the situation is stabilized. Nothing more needs to come in, and that's the stability of Sof Pasuk. And we have several remarks. Number 8, the beginning rain was a natural cover for the super mundane event, and it served. Super means above, so this is an above what would be a plain thing. So this is something that is not plain, not just normal. So the plain rain led to an unnatural rain, and it served also as an occult signal for the beast and other animals to anticipate their migration toward the ark. So as we had learned 2 or 3 psukim ago, that the rain started naturally and then progressed into something that was more destructive, and then into something that was completely atypical of rain. And this gave the animals their cue that it was time to start to move into the ark. Remark B, this phenomenon involved heavenly intervention and was characterized by the application of mercy within judgment and by the elimination of all rules of logic and expectation. So as we see, the order that the animals are coming in isn't the best rules of traffic flow or of stacking or however you want to call it. It is making sure that each has an appropriate place and an appropriate time, but again by divine order, not by the rules of nature, because the divine is above nature and above logic. Comment number C. At a glance, this sentence, like the following ones, seems to be a repetition of the previous statement. In fact, however, they complement one another. This one also indicates planned control within a condition of developing chaos. If before only some species were qualified for admission, min ha-behema, from the animals, me ha'of, from the birds, those that actually came to the ark were all suitable. Kol chaya, kol kanaf. So now, before we were saying that there were ones that were chosen amongst the species, the ones that actually came knew that they were already chosen. So it wasn't a question of, there happened to be 4 chickens walking by, and they all ran for it, and the first pair that got in, they stayed, and nobody else got a chance. The ones who knew that they were going to go knew that they were going to go.
They got the golden ticket.
I also wonder if in this Kol HaKavod, I also wonder if in response to your question about Lemina and Leminehu, Lemina means singular, Lamin Shalah, her species, Leminehu, Laminim Shalahem, Lamin Shalo, Laminehu,
Yes.
Laminim Shalo, more than one kind meaning. So Chaya and Behema were very specific in terms of which animals were going to go. The 4-legged mammalian beast and the 4-legged mammalian domesticated animals. Romes, Polaris Laminehu, the creepy crawlers, that there are many kinds. I mean, there are those with 6 legs that are in a different species from those with 8 legs, the arthropods, for example. But they're all creepers. So they're actually not from the same species. They're from a number of species, but they're in the same category of boarding, living or boarding.
So just to clarify, so there's a male and a female, lemina and lemino. Lemina has an emphatic. Lemineha, and lemino has an emphatic. Leminehu. They actually mean the same thing. Lemino and lemina, male and female of the same thing for its kind. Lemineha and leminehu mean the same thing for its kind, but it's a more emphatic statement of for its kind.
So it's not leminehu, isn't laminim?
No,
Shalo?
that would be leminehem.
That's minim shalahem. Leminehu is laminim shalo.
So you're saying your questioning is, are there multiple types
of under the rubric of creepy crawler? Like more than one species.
Understand.
Well, wouldn't that be the same of the beasts? There'd be more than one species of beast?
Not really, in that an arthropod, something that has 8 legs.
Right.
A spider is different from an ant.
Right.
But in terms of its species, in terms of all of its characteristics, what they share is that they're small and they crawl. So they're actually very different creatures. And then, Leminehu could be tzipor, could be a bird, could be a bat, it could be an insect. These are flying creatures, kol kanaf, anything with a wing. So there are actually many different, not necessarily related creatures, but for this purpose they're grouped under that umbrella of flying living things.
I mean, at the very least, your father's not defining it that way, because liminehu would then be for its kinds, plural.
That's true.
So if you're defining that as multiple types of kinds, if you're saying that's why the change from limino to liminehu, that doesn't fit with the way that he's defining the words.
That's true. Right.
I will again have to go home and look up the actual grammar of that. But as far as I know, it is an emphatic, not a statement of the fact that there is more than one kind.
Yes, you could.
So again, we'll just read the sentence. I know we've read parts of it. Hema v'chol hachaya lemina, v'chol habehema lemina, v'chol haremes al haaretz leminehu, v'chol haof leminehu, kol tzipor kol kanaf. And the difference between the ratio, the first half of the sentence and the second half of the sentence, is perhaps a little more obscure here. Certainly we have things that are following divine order in both halves, but we see perhaps that first word, how they are separating themselves out from the generation is trumpeted, is signified very strongly in that first word, hema, when the animals are separating themselves out from the people of the generation. But by the time we get to the Seifa, by the time we get to the last group that's entering, sort of that cacophony, that need to separate themselves out from the generation, seems to have disappeared. So again, the first time we have perhaps a more emphatic following of divine will. In the second half, we don't. We just have following the order of what's happened in front of them, and by the way, still fulfilling the divine will, but not as much of a volunteer effort. The first one to go always has perhaps a more difficult task. The Nachshon ben Aminadav having to walk in until his nose before we get on. So that was perhaps a little bit of a more difficult one to fit a difference between Reisha and Seifa, but I still think it applies, especially with the interpretation that we've given to Hema, separating themselves out from the cacophony and the mob mentality of the generation, whereas that's not necessary for the last set that's going in. And I think we'll end here.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Thank you.